Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Saturday, which means it's time for a new FL Basics tutorial. Um, this is the third in the video, third video in the series of Harmor tutorials, the introduction to Harmor. The first one was about additive synthesis, what it means, and what it means for Harmor, and what Harmor means in terms of it being itself. And the next one was about filters and how the filters work in Harmor. This is very much a series, and as such, it's assuming that knowledge in the first two videos are present in your mind. So if you have not watched those videos, I recommend that you do so now. This video was actually going to be about the phaser. As you can see here, I was messing with it, but I decided that because this is the Saturday tutorial, which means that it's going to be a break until the Tuesday one, I actually want to tackle a much more important facet of Harmor before we talked about the phaser. Because the phaser is pretty straightforward, and it's cool and all, and it doesn't need stuff, and it could be, some minds can be blown, but the unison is actually extremely important. So, a big facet of subtractive synthesis is unison, or throwing a whole bunch of voices together. And as I discussed in the beginning of the first video, why unison is considered a subtractive thing when the whole point is that you're piling on additional voices. And really what this means is that when you put more than one voice together and then you, say, change the pitch value, you get that sort of relationship where there is phase cancellation, because if you know anything about basic waveform theory, when two waveforms are played together and they're the same pitch and the same phase, you get constructive interference, I think is what it's called, but I don't know if it's referred to as interference. I haven't looked at this stuff in a long time, but point being, it gets louder. So it doesn't actually change the sound, it just turns it up. So that's not actually, so you're thinking, oh, it makes it louder, that's addition, it's adding. That's not the case, because the character of the sound remains the same. And then the second you change the pitch, though, you start to lose frequency information. You start to lose things as a result of phase cancellation, because eventually what ends up happening is that certain aspects of the sound align in negative phase, because the period ends up being a different length, and then it moves away out of phase of the other voice. And so that creates cancellation, which changes the sound's character in the spectrum. You can very plainly see in an EQ, like holes appearing and attenuation happening in the spectrum. So that's why unison is considered a subtractive thing. Now, the way Harmor does it is the best thing ever made. So back on the idea of this being an additive synthesizer, Harmor works by constructing a sound out of a maximum of 516 individual sign harmonics. So you have your fundamental tone, and then it builds upon it, and you have 516 side harmonics. That sounds like a lot of stuff, because like you could, if you wanted to work hard enough, recreate Harmor sounds by literally piling on individual sine waves tuned to very precise values. So that's all well and good, but then unison is you add in more voices. What is a voice in this context? Well, in Harmor, I mean, there's 516 voices, but it's kind of like a hive mind. It's a hive voice. It's like if there's like Harmor is the queen and the voices are all individual ants, and the ants are acting at the will of Harmor and doing what it instructs them all individually to do. It's a swarm. It's creating a swarm. Every single voice and it's 516 voices, but it is of a single mind. So we can consider the group of 516 voices creating one note, one mind, one note, one voice to be a voice. So when we add in another voice, that's 516 more sine waves. And you can have up to 9, which is a large number of sine waves happening. And at the surface, we get all of our standard sort of unison controls. We have, voice count, we have pitch depth. So how far apart their voices are being spread in pitch. And then phase, starting phase of individual voices. And then we get some interesting options. If we go all the way up, we get full blur, which is actually not just maximum phase spread, because it's actually different every time you hit a voice. And so that's something that's purely an additive function. And then of course we have equal spread difference or jump ahead difference. So like there's lots of sort of interesting options involved there. And then of course you have all aligned, which means that the starting position of the phase of every voice begins at the point a note is pressed. Yeah. And then of course we have modes, unison distribution modes. We have classic, blurred, uniform, random, and Hertz. Now this is all extremely interesting. Like the differences between these four are not super duper obvious at first. Like I kind of have a handle on it because I've been doing it for a long time, so I kind of get it. And random is just different for every hit, but the Hertz mode, this is something that's specifically an additive only option. And what this does, because think about what happens when you pitch spread. Like if you change the pitch of a single tone, a complex waveform, like we have one of those saw waves coming in, and it changes. You change the pitch to create a Reese space, for example. You move it away, say a ratio of 0.03 away, or like 30 cents from. Yes, 30 cents from the. Is that really? Hold on. 30. I guess maybe 300 cents. No, 30 cents. That's what I wanted to say. You move that away, and then you get the sort of Reese sound. So the fundamental tone is being moved away, at 30 cents. Well, what does that translate into in terms of actual Hertz values? Well, 30 cents away from 50 Hertz is not a lot of Hertz. It's like maybe 5, not a huge amount. But like that same distance in Hertz high values is like hundreds of Hertz. And so that sort of relationship that kind of relationship in Hertz separation. So if we look at that not in terms of tonal value, but Hertz values, lower values get moved away at smaller levels than higher values, and that comes across to us as an even tone distribution. However, in Harmor, we can set Hertz mode, which means that the pitch spreading is an even Hertz value. So if the sound moves away at 5 Hertz on the low end, that note gets moved away at 30 cents or whatever 5 Hertz actually is. But then 5 Hertz at 10,000 Hertz has a very different impact, especially when it's distributed in that even way across the node. So that creates an extremely unique tone. And I think that's interesting as hell. And then of course we have alternate modes, which are typically just kind of an opposite kind of influence. Typically phase opposite. This is just a different way. So screw around with that. You can kind of get a feel for it. Screwing around with things and getting a feel for it is kind of the name of the game for this sort of stuff. Getting a feel for how to actually build a sound out of what's happening is very much going to be a very experiential kind of thing for you. And what these tutorial series is going to do is pretty much explain why things are happening and hopefully inform your decisions when you screw around. But now, oh my God, now this is game-changing magic for synthesis in general. I've talked about this a lot in lots of how to bass videos because this is like the crux of a lot of extremely interesting sounds that I like to do. So let's consider for a moment this whole idea of the hive mind. We talked about the voice hive mind. One voice, 516 little ants that are the harmonics, and it's a hive, right? You can individually control each one. And so when we do unison stuff, we're actually like we discussed the difference between the Hertz mode and like the classic modes in unison. That's actually is not just like, okay, whole thing up 1 cent, right? You actually have to make the individual command to discern what that value is at the low end versus what that value is at the high end for those harmonics. It's actually very different commands. And that idea is really important because it means that the unison of when there's a new voice being added in, a new set of swarming harmonics, you can change individually what the pitch difference is in all of those harmonics. And how do you do this? You do this by going in the drop-down menu and going to harmonic unison pitch, and we get this beautiful window. I can't even explain. I can totally explain how awesome this is. This is what this is for. This is what the tutorial is for. What I can't explain is my feelings for this. This has changed my world, and I hope it changes yours too. So we get this line. And what this graph represents is the octave distribution of the harmonics. So we have here 9 octaves, I believe, or 10? Nope, 9. So if I move around the mouse and you look over here in the information section in the upper left-hand corner, we can see that this is separating itself into octaves. So like here's the first octave, here's second octave, third octave, fourth octave, fifth octave, sixth octave, seventh, eighth, and ninth. This is actually the ninth. How the fuck did I mess that up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, I can count. I promise. And what this does is this graph represents this slider here. So when this slider is up here and this line is flat, this means that this value is constant throughout the entire octave spread of the sound of the voice, the individual voice. Well, both voices. This is for all voices at once, not just controlling one voice. But we will talk about individual voice control. That's something that can happen too with Unison. So then we get that. So then, if I were to do, say, this, it's a very blocky example. What this will do is it means that for these octaves, everything is normal. They're all normal. Well, when we get to octave 5, so between octave 5 and 6, these values actually have a higher pitch depth setting than the rest of them. What does that mean? It basically means that for these few harmonics, so that's probably actually like 50, for a whole bunch of harmonics in that area, this slider might as well be set up here. But the rest of them are still different. You can even see the effect in one of the voices as like, because this is scrunching together and making lots of harmonics be stuck together. That's a little less, it's more diffuse, and it's a little harder to see, but it has basically the same result. And damn, because what this basically is it's solving for n for ever having to frequency split ever again. You're still going to want to do so for like post-processing, but consider yourself a neuro producer circa 2006, right? You're trying to make your Noisia bass and you're trying to do it up and you can't, and people are always telling you to frequency split your Reese and then apply different effects to it, but specifically different pitch effects like choruses and flangers or whatever. Choruses and flangers are basically poor man's unison, because unison isn't really a pitch effect. It's not an effect at all. It's the result of more voices. It's a voice effect. And this has been the bane for everyone's existence forever, because basically what you were limited to doing was creating a frequency split where you band split often 3 times, low, mid, and high, and then you would put different chorus effects, and if you were lucky, you would get kind of a similar result to say, doing something like this, right? Something like that. And then you distort it. And if you did your job right, you would get a sound kind of like that. Not quite like that, because this is still being unison, basically perfect chorus effect. If a chorus effect could do anything it wanted, it would do that. But because this is the future, we can do even more absurd things. Like we're, doing blockiness and cool stuff like that, but we can do this. We can do that. And this is utter insanity. Like what is happening here? God damn it. Okay, so this is what the game change is here. So when I said solving for n, what I meant basically is because of this hive mind, because of these ants, these individual harmonics, all moving around as directed by the voice, the hive, the queen of the hive, the voice. We can use this and consider it basically a 516 band split. That not only is it a band split, but it's note following, because it's the bass harmonic, and then as the notes move around and whatever, the position of the harmonics all shifts according to the notes, which means that this data is shifting according to the note, because it's by octave, not by spectral position. These aren't Hertz values. This is octaves. So that's what this is. And this split, like, you can't do that. You couldn't do that with band splitting. You would need calculus to figure out what values these would be after you made your 516 band splits that would only work for a single note. I guess you could record it and then like re-import it into a sampler and then play that higher or lower or whatever. That probably would work out more or less fine if you did that. But 516 splits. I did that with like no effort in Harmor. I had to know it was there. That's all the effort that I just expended to do that. To do that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the best thing that's ever happened to the world. Anywho, like this is like the main point of the Unison thing. So we have to look this, like we have to wrap our minds around the idea that this isn't, when we play a note, we're not just playing one sound. We're playing 516 sounds that are coming together to make a collage of sound and to add up to the note. Because we have the note, which is broken into voices, which is broken into 516 individual harmonics per voice, and that's all being determined by all these parameters that we're screwing with, you know, in additive synthesis land. And boy, that's just awesome. And of course, we have unison phase based on keyboard mapping and all sorts of other stuff. So when we go over here, though, this is one of these parameters, but it doesn't have a mod tab. You can't really mess with it. You can move this, and you can actually move it while you're playing it. That's been a central part in a lot of my how to bass videos. However, I mentioned earlier about using unison voices to control things individually, and I'm going to explain what that means right now. So here, let's actually turn out the distortion. We have, it's like unnoticeable when I did that. We have 9 voices with no panning, no pitch, and aligned phase, which means that there's effectively no change to the sound. It's just adding together lots of piled on sine waves. But we can do interesting things, like we can have let's make one of those vowel-based things that I did in the filter section of this tutorial, like real quick. Can we mess with this? Yes, we can. I think this is the thing that I can do. I haven't actually tried doing this, but I just got the idea. All right, so we got that. Now let's go in here, edit articulator, and go to unison index mapping. Now, what the heck is unison index mapping? And why is it only showing me 4 voices? Oh, this is random mapping. Unison index mapping. There we go. There we go. So as you saw me increase and decrease the voice count here, you saw that these lines increased and decreased. And what these lines represent are values for the individual voices. So by default, in the unison index mapping, the filter 1 resonance width, which is this knob here, basically says that for all these voices, it's going to be the maximum value of what I set, which is 0 to 100%. There's no bipolar nature here. So if I were to do something like this, what this would mean is that on voice 1, this would actually be down 50%. And on voice 2, this would be down 53%, 60% maybe, kind of thing. So basically for each individual voice, not the whole note, but broken down into one of the 9 voices, we can say that the resonance value is going to be offset as this line indicates. And we can actually set individually for each of the 9 voices a completely independent position. Now, we can only actually see one voice at a time in the spectrum view, which is kind of an unfortunate thing because I kind of wanted to see what that would look like together. But what we've basically done here is that in this voice, in this voice, it looks like that. We can actually see it change. Despite the fact that the width is staying where it is, this is offsetting that width for just that voice, though. These are all being added in. So if I were to pan it, very slight differences are happening because this is very widespread. I suppose I could make slighter changes. A more obvious demonstration of this, I think, would be if we were to get rid of all this and go to the pitch setting. Let's see, pitch. Let's just turn it off. So here we can actually individually set what the pitch is for the individual units of voices, which can actually be way more of a spread than the actual pitch spread in the unison settings, because the unison settings in the pitch spread are designed to stay within like average acceptable ranges. But in here we can determine, we can even make a chord. Like, let's see, these are set up in sense, and we can like go way high. As you see here, this thing will zoom in and out and stuff like that. But we are here in 1 octave, I think. Like, that's an octave. Yeah. So here, let's make voice 2 an octave. Let's make voice 3 a fifth. Oh boy, how do I do that? I gotta get in to 700 cents. So then that's a fifth, and then the rest of these I want to be 1. And panned. Actually, the rest of these are loud. So let's make let's just make it 3 voices. Now you see, of course, this shape is still here despite the fact that the lines moved. So I gotta let's engage slide. And then yerp, yerp, yerp. There it is. So this is still an octave, yep. And then I got the third one here wrong. Plus 700. And that's basically a power chord. Let's make it a add 3. So 13, 1500. So that's a more obvious demonstration of what you can do with the unison index mapping. I actually did a whole tutorial just on this because this is actually not something that's unique to Harmor. You can do this in Citrus too. You have unison index mapping as a modifier tab for most things that are parameters in Citrus. And this has sort of the same effect. You basically can control parameters individually. Like, you can control the filter position, you can control the res width value, as I said. Pretty much anything that has an articulator. You can go and see if it has unison index mapping in here. Not all things will, though. Like the harmonic use, the pitch doesn't. What else doesn't? Speed doesn't even. The speed of the phaser doesn't even have an articulator. You can't mess with that. Keyboard tracking, that kind of stuff. Some of those things basically aren't going to have the unison index mapping available to you. But that is a function of there being unison voices. So once we add in individual voices, we can basically control them as if they were a second part entirely. Like, Harmor has this A and B thing where you can load up 2 parts entirely. But if we add individual voices, we're basically loading in 4 more Harmors with limited functionality. Like, we don't have 4 individual instances of the harmonic unison pitch window and phaser speed and stuff like that. But for the large, like, macro controls, like the filters, phaser settings, pitch values, like knob settings for various degrees, that kind of thing, you have control over those. So that's kind of awesome. And then, of course, you can pan them individually. I mean, this is really good for like super duper, like when you want to really blur something together. Because like when you make a supersaw, you want to blur the voices together in such a way that creates like a cloud of sound. And you can do that, and you can like add in, say, individual prism, and then change the prism value for all 4 voices, and then pan them. And then that difference in between the voices will be very stereo friendly. You know what I mean? It won't lean one way or another because they're distributed in a parameter that's very different sounding for that kind of thing. So that's more or less all there is to know about unison. The really big thing is this whole concept of the hive mind and individual voices being controlled to do your bidding as the master and commander of additive synthesis, which is what you are when you use Harmor. If you have any questions about any of this, oh my God, let me know, because I love talking about this shit. And I will see you next week on Tuesday when we continue more bits and pieces about how Harmor works. And eventually we'll have a whole long series of start to finish of how Harmor works. And hopefully I'm not like talking out of my ass. I'm pretty sure I know what I'm talking about on most of this stuff. Let me know if I don't, though, and point out to me like in the manual where stuff is up. Because some of the stuff like I don't really use, and so I don't know what it even does. Like the adapt thing, I had to figure out what that did. I mean, that's fine for the full tutorial. But for the most part, I have pretty good command of what's happening, and I hope I am correctly imparting this information to you, the users. The users. Yeah. Have a nice day.